For more than 13 years, I believed my husband was quietly helping a distant relative who had fallen on hard times. Every month he sent money without fail, always saying it was the right thing to do. I never imagined those payments were hiding a truth that would turn my entire world upside down. Good morning, dear listeners. My name is Eleanor, and at 67 years old, I've finally gathered the courage to share a chapter of my past that I kept locked away for far too long. Before we begin, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It truly encourages me to keep telling these stories. Now, let me take you back to the year 1965, when everything seemed simple. Or at least, that's what I believed. I always believed that the quietest moments in life were the safest. The slow mornings, the soft hum of the kettle, the distant call of birds perched on the oak tree outside our window. That year, 1965, seemed wrapped in gentleness. And back then, I clung to gentleness as if it were a shield strong enough to protect me from the darker corners of the world. But life has a way of showing you that danger rarely announces itself with thunder. Sometimes it arrives wrapped in normality, walking softly so you never hear it coming. For more than 13 years, Walter, my husband, sent money to a relative he claimed was struggling. Every month, without fail, he sealed an envelope, placed it in his coat pocket, and mailed it himself. I never questioned it deeply. After all, Walter was a kind man, or so I believed. When someone you love offers a simple explanation, it feels easier to trust than to pry. But the morning everything changed wasn't remarkable in any way. I was sweeping the kitchen floor when I heard the soft rattle of metal from the front yard. A sound too deliberate to be the wind. I glanced out the window. Walter's car door was slightly open. Strange, he always locked it. Always. I hesitated, broom still in hand. Then curiosity nudged me forward. I stepped outside, the cool morning air brushing against my face. The door wasn't just open, it was ajar like someone had rummaged inside. I told myself Walter probably forgot to shut it properly, but something felt wrong. A quiet wrongness that settled heavy in my chest. I leaned into the car to close the glove compartment when I noticed a small stack of papers tucked under the passenger seat. Not neatly placed, shoved hastily as though someone had hidden them quickly. Against my better judgment, I pulled them out. There were 3 envelopes, all addressed to Walter. None opened. But what stopped my breath wasn't the envelopes. It was the handwriting of the sender. The same sharp, impatient strokes I recognized from the anonymous letter I had found days earlier. My heart thumped painfully. Why were these letters hidden in the car? Why had Walter not mentioned them? Why did he pretend everything was ordinary? For a moment, I stood there frozen, the sunlight warming my back while an icy dread settled inside me. I should have gone inside, should have waited for Walter to come home, should have pretended I never saw the envelopes. Instead, I opened the first one. It contained nothing but a single sentence. "Your time is almost up." My hands trembled. The second letter was no better. "We warned you, don't make us repeat ourselves." The third envelope had only 2 words, "Pay tonight." My legs grew weak. I leaned against the car door, struggling to make sense of the messages. This wasn't a family matter. This wasn't charity. This wasn't a distant relative struggling with life. This was a threat, a real, deliberate threat. I looked around the yard, suddenly aware of every rustle of leaves, every shifting shadow. The quiet street seemed unfamiliar. The world felt smaller, tighter. Had someone been watching us, watching me? I was still gripping the letters when a soft voice startled me. "Mrs. Reed!" I turned sharply. Our neighbor, old Mr. Garvey, stood by his fence, eyes narrowed with a concern I didn't understand. "You should be careful with that car," he said. "Saw someone poking around it last night after you 2 went asleep." My breath caught. "What did he look like?" I asked. Garvey shook his head. "Tall, wore a cap, didn't recognize him, moved like he knew what he was doing." A shiver crawled down my spine. Someone had been here, touched our belongings, watched us while we slept. I thanked Mr. Garvey and hurried inside, clutching the letters like they might burn me. I didn't know what frightened me more, the words in the envelopes or the realization that someone had been bold enough to get that close. When Walter came home for lunch that day, I confronted him. Not fully, just gently. I asked if everything was all right, if he was stressed, if anything was bothering him. He smiled, kissed my forehead, told me I worried too much. But his hands trembled when he reached for his tea. And that's when I knew, whatever he was hiding, it was far bigger than I imagined. And it was coming for us. The next day, I decided to follow Walter, quietly, from a distance. And what I saw him do in that abandoned alley made my blood run cold. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the words from those envelopes burned behind my eyelids. Your time is almost up. Pay tonight. Threats, real ones, directed at my husband without a single explanation. And Walter, he slept beside me as if nothing in the world was wrong. As if his hands hadn't trembled when I asked him about his day. As if he hadn't hidden letters, lied for years, and brought danger so close I could smell it on the morning air. I waited for dawn with my heart in my throat. Walter dressed early, as he always did, and left the house with a muttered goodbye, claiming he had some errands to run. But something about the way he avoided my eyes confirmed what I already knew. He wasn't going where he said. Not that day. I couldn't stay inside another moment pretending ignorance. Something inside me, fear, desperation, or perhaps an instinct sharpened over decades, told me the truth wouldn't come to me. I had to chase it, so I followed him. I kept a distance as I walked down the quiet streets, staying behind fences, trees, bus stops, blending into the slow morning rhythm of the town. At 67, I didn't move as fast as I used to, but fear is a powerful motivator. Fear will make your legs carry you farther than they should. Walter turned down a narrow street I rarely saw him use, then another, and another, until he slipped into the one place no ordinary man had business going, the old brickyard alley. It was a forgotten stretch behind the mills, abandoned carts, broken crates, rusted metal, and graffiti that never seemed to fade. The path was barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side, a place where secrets liked to hide. My heart thudded painfully. I crept closer until I could see him, Walter standing in the middle of the alley, hands shoved in his coat pockets, glancing over his shoulder like a child expecting punishment. Then a second figure emerged from the shadows. Tall, broad, face obscured by a cap. The same description Mr. Garvey had given. I ducked behind a half-collapsed wooden crate, praying it wouldn't creak. Through a thin crack in the boards, I watched. Walter didn't greet the man. He didn't smile. He stood stiff, like someone bracing for cold water. The man stepped closer. Not friendly, not rushed, just certain. "You're late," he said. His voice was low, coarse, and sent a tremor through me even from a distance. Walter swallowed. I tried to get the rest. I just need more time." "No more time." The man's tone sharpened. "You already know what happens if you don't pay." My breath hitched. Walter opened his coat and pulled out a slim envelope, the same kind he always mailed each month. He held it out with a shaking hand. "This is all I have right now." The man snatched it, tore it open, and counted the money inside. His jaw tightened. "This isn't enough," he growled. Walter stepped back. "Please, you said you would give me until—" "There is no until anymore," the man snapped. For a moment, the world felt utterly still. I saw the man grab Walter's collar, pushing him hard against the brick wall. Walter didn't fight. He just sagged under the man's grip like someone used to being handled. "You think this is optional?" the man hissed. "You think we won't come to your house?" My entire body froze. House, our home, where I slept. Where Walter pretended everything was normal, where those letters came from. "I'm trying," Walter pleaded. "Please don't involve my wife." The man let out a cold laugh. "Not my decision. You should have thought of that before you agreed." My fingers dug into the old crate, knuckles white, my breath shallow. I prayed they wouldn't hear me. The man shoved Walter once more and stepped back. "You have 1 week," he said. "No more lies, no more excuses." He leaned in closer. "And if you run, we'll find you." Walter nodded helplessly. The man walked past him, brushing dangerously close to my hiding spot. I held my breath so long my chest burned. Only when his footsteps faded did I dare exhale. Walter stayed there for a long moment, staring at the ground, shoulders slumped in defeat. I had never seen him look so small. When he left the alley, I didn't follow him home. I couldn't. I stayed hidden until my trembling legs allowed me to move. Everything I had believed about my husband, every kind gesture, every soft word, every act I once thought generous, now felt like a puzzle piece belonging to a much darker picture. This wasn't charity. This wasn't kindness. This was survival. Walter wasn't helping a relative. Walter was paying someone to keep a threat away, and I had no idea how deep the danger went. That same night, Walter tried to hide something in our house, but I found it before he could, and what I uncovered pushed me deeper into a truth I wasn't ready for. That night, Walter behaved like a man walking on a tightrope stretched over a canyon. Every sound startled him. Every movement felt tense. He barely ate, barely spoke, and kept wiping his palms on his trousers as if trying to hide the sweat of fear. But he wouldn't look at me, not properly, not the way a husband should, and I pretended to wash dishes, pretended to straighten cushions, pretended to read, but inside me something had shifted. A crack. A tearing open of awareness. I knew what I had seen. I knew he was lying. And now I knew there was a man out there, dangerous and impatient, waiting for something my husband couldn't give. Walter stayed up later than usual. He kept pacing between the living room and the hallway like he was waiting for a moment when I'd disappear. At first, I didn't understand what he was looking for, but then I watched his eyes. He kept glancing at the hallway closet, the closet he rarely opened, the closet he once told me held old tools and nothing important. Around 10 o'clock, he said he was going to take out the trash. "We're out of bags," I lied. He froze for a second, then forced a smile. "I'll grab some from the shed." He left through the back door in a hurry, too much hurry for a simple chore. And the moment his footsteps faded down the path, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I walked straight to the hallway closet. I opened it. At first, everything looked ordinary: winter coats, an umbrella, a broken radio, boxes of decorations, dusty boots. But behind the coats, I noticed something new. A small metal toolbox. Clean, out of place among our old belongings, and heavy. My hands trembled as I reached for it. Inside was a second, smaller box, dark wood, polished with a brass latch. Something about its weight told me I wasn't supposed to open it, but fear outweighed curiosity. I clicked the latch. Inside were several rolled papers tied with twine, a small envelope with Walter's name, a thin black notebook, and worst of all, a photograph. I lifted it with shaking fingers. It was a picture of our house, taken from the street, from the perspective of someone standing very still, watching. I swallowed hard. This wasn't Walter's photo. He would never take something like this. This belonged to someone else. Someone who had been near our home, maybe even inside our yard. Heart pounding, I unrolled the first bundle of papers. They weren't letters, they were crude notices. The same harsh handwriting as before. "Final chance. No more delays. We know where you live." I felt lightheaded. The black notebook was filled with numbers, dates, and initials. I didn't understand most of it, but one thing stood out. Every date matched the days Walter mailed money. Every one. My throat tightened as I opened the envelope with Walter's name. Inside was a short note, different handwriting this time. Smoother, more controlled. "If you involve your wife, she won't make it to the next payment." A soft gasp escaped my lips. He wasn't hiding this because he was ashamed. He wasn't hiding this because he made a mistake. He was hiding this because someone threatened my life. Suddenly, I heard the back door open. Walter was back. I nearly dropped the box as I shoved everything inside and pressed the closet door closed. I leaned against the wall, trying to slow my breathing. "Eleanor," Walter's voice called, cautious. "Yes," I replied, forcing calm. He stepped into the hallway, eyes scanning me in a way that made me feel exposed. "What were you doing?" "Just tidying." He didn't believe me. I saw it instantly. A flicker in his eyes, fear, panic, guilt. He walked toward the closet, reaching for the door. My heart stopped. If he opened it, he'd know I had seen everything, so I stepped in front of him. "Walter," I said softly, "can we talk, just for a moment?" He hesitated. And then, unlike the man I married, he pulled his hand away, swallowed hard, and whispered, "Not tonight." He walked past me, heading to bed, leaving me alone in the hallway with the weight of the secrets I now carried. But I wasn't just afraid anymore. I was angry and determined. Walter didn't know it, but the truth was no longer locked in darkness. I had seen the first piece. and I was going to find the rest. The next morning, I confronted someone who knew far more than they pretended, and what they confessed revealed that Walter wasn't the only one keeping dangerous secrets. Morning arrived heavy and gray, as if the sky itself sensed something was wrong inside our home. Walter left early without a word, his coat barely slipping onto his shoulders before he hurried out the door. He didn't kiss my cheek, didn't look me in the eyes, didn't offer even a brittle smile. Cowards avoid the people they've hurt, and my husband was avoiding more than just guilt. I watched from the window as he walked briskly down the road, glancing over his shoulder more times than a man with nothing to hide should. Once he disappeared around the corner, I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The house felt too quiet, too still, too full of secrets. I knew that confronting Walter directly would lead nowhere. He was already drowning in fear, and desperate men say anything to survive. I needed the truth from someone who wasn't tangled in the lies. And that led me to only one person, Mr. Garvey, our longtime neighbor. He lived 3 houses down, a retired postman with sharp eyes and a sharper memory. People underestimated him because of his age, but he noticed things others brushed past. And last night, I realized something important. Garvey hadn't been concerned. Garvey had been warning me. His comment about the man near our car wasn't casual. He didn't tell stories without purpose. If he had seen something once, he likely saw something more. So I put on my coat and walked down the street. When Garvey answered the door, he squinted at me, then stepped aside with a polite gesture. "Eleanor, you're up early." "Yes," I said softly, "and I need to speak with you." "Privately?" His brow creased, but he nodded and led me inside to his tidy sitting room. Knitted blankets draped over old armchairs, the faint smell of peppermint tea lingering in the air. Once we sat, I got straight to the point. "You said you saw someone near our car the other night. Was that the first time?" Garvey's jaw tightened. "I wish it was," he muttered. A cold prickle ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" He leaned back, folding his hands. "Eleanor, for months now, I've seen a man around your house. At night, early mornings, sometimes even when Walter was at work. I didn't want to frighten you, but what?" I pressed. Garvey sighed deeply. "I thought it had to do with Walter. He's been acting strange, hasn't he?" My heart thumped, so I wasn't imagining everything. Other people had noticed it too. "What exactly did you see?" I asked. Garvey hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I saw that same man, tall, wearing a cap, checking your mailbox more than once. I saw him standing near your back gate. And once I saw him near your window." I felt my heartbeat in my throat. "And you didn't tell me sooner because he wasn't watching you," Garvey said quietly. "He was watching Walter." A chill clawed its way down my spine. "Watching him?" I whispered. Garvey nodded. "Your husband met someone in the back alley behind the brickyard a few weeks ago." I didn't hear what they said, but Walter looked frightened. The other man seemed angry. "The very alley where I saw Walter yesterday." "But how did you see that?" I asked. "I was on my way home from the corner store," he said. "Walter didn't know I was there." He paused, voice lowering. "And the very next night I saw that man again, walking past your home, slowly, as if he was checking something." I leaned forward. "Checking what?" Garvey stared at the floor. "Checking whether Walter told you anything." The room felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. And then Garvey added something that hollowed me out. He wasn't alone the second time. There was another person with him. "A woman." "A woman?" I repeated. He nodded. "Short hair, dark coat, looked familiar, but I couldn't see her face well enough." A woman involved, someone close enough to our neighborhood that she looked familiar. My stomach clenched at the thought. Garvey placed a hand on my arm. "Eleanor, I don't know what Walter is caught in, but I know danger when I see it. And whatever this is, it's not small." I swallowed hard. "Do you think they'll come back?" Garvey didn't hesitate. "They never leave, Eleanor. Men like that only get stronger if no one stops them." Fear curled in my chest. He was right. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't a mistake. Walter had been tangled in something deep and dangerous long before I ever saw those letters. And now, I was tangled too. When I stood to leave, Garvey said one last thing, something that haunted me the rest of the day. "Be careful who you trust. Sometimes danger hides in the faces we've known the longest." Later that afternoon, I discovered something in Walter's coat pocket, something that proved the strangers watching our house weren't the only people hiding the truth. I returned home from Mr. Garvey's house with my heart banging against my ribs like a warning drum. His words repeated over and over in my mind, refusing to settle. Be careful who you trust. He wasn't watching you, he was watching Walter. The woman looked familiar. A familiar woman. Someone close. Someone who had no business standing outside our home at night. Every possibility felt dangerous. When I stepped inside my house, the silence greeted me like a cold hand. Nothing had changed on the surface. The teacup on the table, the lamp by the armchair, the slow ticking of the clock, all the same. But I wasn't the same. And neither was the truth unraveling in front of me. I took off my coat, hung it on the hook, and reached for Walter's. It had been draped over the chair since morning, carelessly tossed as if he didn't want to look at it again. Something tugged the inside lining. A weight, a small object pulling the fabric down. Curiosity tightened my chest. I slid my hand inside the inner pocket and felt something cold and metallic. I pulled it out. A key, old, silver, and worn. Attached to a small tag with smudged ink. I held it up to the light. The tag read, "Shed do not open." My stomach twisted. What shed? Not ours. Ours didn't have a lock, and this key was far too old for it. Not the neighbor's. Garvey's shed was a simple wooden structure with a latch. This meant something else, something hidden. I studied the key again. The metal had scratches, fresh, not old. Someone had used it recently. And the warning, "Do not open." Who wrote that? Walter, or someone warning him? Before I could think further, a soft knock startled me. I nearly dropped the key. It wasn't a firm knock, not confident, not aggressive. It was gentle, almost apologetic. I peeked through the window. It was Mrs. Langley, the widow from across the street. A quiet woman, always polite, always offering a smile when I passed by. She lived alone and rarely left her house except for church on Sundays. She waved at me, a tight smile on her lips. I tucked the key inside my apron and opened the door. "Eleanor," she said softly. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," I replied, though my nerves were high. "Is everything all right?" She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I wanted to ask if you've seen anything strange lately." My pulse quickened. "Strange how?" She glanced over her shoulder as if afraid someone might be listening. "Men walking around the neighborhood, standing near the fences, watching people." My heartbeat doubled. "You've seen them too," I whispered. She nodded. "2 nights ago, one stood near my mailbox for almost 10 minutes, and last weeky someone was looking into your backyard." My breath hitched. So it wasn't just us. It wasn't just Walter. These men were circling the neighborhood like wolves. "Did you see their faces?" I asked. "No," she said. "They were careful, too careful." I noticed her hands shaking slightly. "Mrs. Langley, why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I was afraid," she whispered, "and I didn't want to get involved." I felt a pang, not anger, but a sad understanding. Fear silences more people than threats ever do. As she turned to leave, she paused and pressed something into my hand. "I found this on my porch this morning," she said. I think it might be meant for you." She hurried away before I could respond. I closed the door, my breath unsteady, and opened my hand. It was a small folded note. Inside were 5 words, ugly, sharp, and frighteningly familiar. "Why is she watching you?" My blood ran cold. Who was she? My mind raced back to Garvey's words. A woman with short dark hair, someone familiar, watching your home. A woman. Someone who knew us. Someone close. I grabbed Walter's coat again, clenching the key inside my fist, and realized something terrifying. This wasn't just Walter's secret. This was becoming mine. I needed answers. And the only way to get them was to find the shed this key belonged to. But before that, I had to confirm something with Walter, something that had been building in my mind since the moment I found the first letter. Because if there was another woman involved, it wasn't just about danger anymore. It might be betrayal. That night, I followed the keys trail, and what I discovered hidden behind an overgrown fence proved that Walter had been meeting someone he never wanted me to know about. All evening, the key in my apron pocket felt heavier than metal should allow, like it carried a truth waiting to crush me. Walter returned home after dark, shoulders tense, face pale, hands trembling the moment he saw me in the hallway. It wasn't guilt in his eyes. It was fear. But not fear of me, fear of something behind him, something closing in. I served dinner quietly. Walter barely touched his plate. Every tick of the clock deepened the silence stretching between us. Eventually, he rose from the table and muttered something about being tired. He kissed my forehead, an old habit, now hollow, and went to bed. The moment I heard his breathing settle into sleep, I slipped on my coat, took the key, and stepped outside. The night air was sharp, biting at my cheeks. A pale moon hung low over the rooftops, casting long shadows across the yards. Every rustle of leaves felt like a warning. Every flicker of movement forced me to look twice. But I had made up my mind. Whatever Walter was hiding, I needed to see it with my own eyes. I followed the narrow path behind our home, the same direction Walter often walked before running errands. At the end of the road, behind a tangle of overgrown hedges, there stood a small, forgotten structure. An old storage shed I had assumed belonged to the abandoned property next door. But tonight, under the thin moonlight, something felt wrong. The shed door was clean. The ground in front of it was disturbed. Footprints, fresh, marked the soil. Someone had been here recently, maybe even today. My heart pounded as I stepped closer. I slid the key into the rusty lock. It fit perfectly. With a shaky breath, I turned it. The lock clicked open with a softness that made my stomach twist. Inside, the shed smelled of dust, damp wood, and something faintly chemical. My eyes adjusted to the dim light leaking through the cracks in the walls. What I found inside wasn't tools or forgotten junk. It was a small table, a chair, a lantern, and scattered papers. A place someone used regularly. On the table lay several items, a folded map of our neighborhood, photographs, receipts, and a small notebook. My hands trembled as I picked up the nearest photo. It was Walter, standing at the brickyard alley, looking terrified. Another photo, Walter handing an envelope to the tall man with the cap. And another, our house. My silhouette behind the living room curtains. I pressed a hand to my mouth. Someone had been watching us, documenting us, studying us. But the worst photograph, the one that made my knees nearly buckle, was of a woman, short dark hair, wearing a heavy coat, standing near our back gate at night. Her face was partially blurred, but not blurred enough. I recognized her. It was Mrs. Langley, the same woman who had come to my door that morning, the same woman who claimed she was afraid, the same woman who had handed me that ominous note. My breath grew shallow. Why lie about seeing the men? Why pretend she didn't know what was happening? Why return a note meant for me unless she wanted to mislead me? My hands shook violently as I stared at the photograph. Mrs. Langley wasn't afraid. She was involved. Before my mind could process it fully, a sound cracked through the night, a twig snapping. Someone was outside. I froze, clutching the table's edge for balance. I slowly stepped toward the crack between the boards. Through it, I saw a figure standing just outside the shed door. Not tall, not broad, not the man from the alley. A woman, short hair, dark coat. Mrs. Langley, my throat clenched. She wasn't knocking this time. She wasn't pretending to be a polite neighbor. She stood perfectly still, facing the shed, as if waiting for me. The lantern flickered. My pulse hammered in my ears. Why was she here? What did she want? Did she know I had the key? The door creaked slightly under her touch, just enough to make my breath catch. Then she spoke through the crack, her voice flat and emotionless. "You shouldn't be here, Eleanor." My blood ran cold. She knew. She knew I found the shed. She knew I followed Walter's trail. She knew I had the key. I stepped back, heart pounding like it would explode. I scanned the shed quickly. There was no other exit. She spoke again, voice lower, almost disappointed. "You weren't supposed to find this yet." Yet, the words struck me like lightning. I clutched the notebook from the table, hiding it under my coat. I didn't know why, only that something inside me told me it was important. Footsteps approached the door. Slow, intentional, deadly calm. I pressed myself against the far wall, breath shallow, waiting for her to force the door open. But instead, she whispered one final sentence. "You're making things worse for both of us." Then her footsteps faded back into the night. The door never opened. She didn't need to confront me. Her message was clear. She knew I was digging deeper. And she wasn't the only one watching. I waited several minutes before I dared to leave the shed. When I finally stepped outside, the path was empty. Mrs. Langley was gone, but the danger she brought with her lingered like smoke. I hurried home, clutching the stolen notebook, praying Walter hadn't woken up yet. Inside the notebook was the truth, the real reason he had been paying for 13 long years, and I was about to uncover it. When I opened the stolen notebook, I discovered names, too many names, and one of them belonged to someone I never imagined being part of Walter's secret. I reached home with shaking hands, breath fogging in the cold night air, the notebook pressed tightly against my chest as if someone could tear it from me. The house was dark and silent. Walter was still asleep, unaware of the storm building just below the surface of our lives. I locked the door quietly, slipped off my shoes, and tiptoed into the living room. The lamplight spilled a soft glow across the room as I settled into the armchair and opened the notebook. Its pages were filled with cramped handwriting, notes squeezed into the margins, numbers written and rewritten. It wasn't organized like a ledger, it was closer to a diary, but not a diary of personal thoughts. This was a record of transactions, dates, and names. Names, dozens of them. I flipped through, each page tightening the knot in my stomach. Most names were unfamiliar. Some had check marks beside them. Others had red lines drawn through them, like they'd been erased from existence. Then I reached a page with only 3 names written on it, and my heart stopped. Walter Reed, Richard Garvey, Fay Langley, 3 people, all living on my street, my neighbor, my other neighbor, and my husband. A sickening wave washed over me. Garvey, who warned me. Langley, who watched us. Walter, who lied, all connected. I placed my finger on Garvey's name. It had a blue circle drawn around it. Next to it, old contact, knows too much. Langley's name had a star beside it. Reliable, reports directly. Reports to who? I turned the page, heart racing faster. Walter's name had a red mark beside it, and next to it were 3 words that made my breath catch painfully. Owes the most. Owes the most? My husband, the man who saved pennies in jars and never once missed a mortgage payment. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I turned the page again, desperate for answers. More names, more codes, more marks. Then, toward the middle of the notebook, on a page stained with something dark, ink, I hoped, I saw a short message written in a different pen. If Reed breaks, bring her in. Her, me, someone had written instructions, and I was part of them. The room suddenly felt colder, the shadows longer, the lamp's light flickering. I felt watched, and not just by the notebook. I closed my eyes and let the truth wash over me. Walter wasn't being threatened because of a single mistake. He wasn't sending money to protect a distant relative. He wasn't paying for someone else's safety. He was paying for mine. And they were done waiting. The fear I felt earlier, when I saw someone near the shed, now pressed harder against my ribs. Someone else knew I had the notebook. Someone else knew I'd been digging. Mrs. Langley's words echoed in my mind. You're making things worse, for both of us. She wasn't warning me to protect me. She was warning me because she was afraid the organization would find out I'd seen too much. I skimmed through more pages, flipping faster, now searching for patterns. Notes like, deliver after dark. She doesn't suspect. Use Garvey only if necessary. Payment every 30 days, no exceptions. Then one final phrase scrawled on the inside back cover. Everything begins at the brickyard. The brickyard, where I'd followed Walter, where he'd been threatened, where men met in the shadows. Everything began there. My hands shook so violently I had to set the notebook down. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked. I jolted, my heart leaping into my throat. Eleanor! A voice floated from the hallway, Walter. I quickly shoved the notebook under the cushion beside me, wiping my palms on my skirt. He stepped into the living room, rubbing his eyes. What are you doing awake? His face was pale, drawn, older somehow. He looked exhausted. Couldn't sleep, I said softly. He hesitated. I had a nightmare. I watched him carefully. About what? He shook his head. Nothing important. Lies, every word, every breath. But I didn't confront him. Not yet. Not until I understood more. He walked toward the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, then leaned on the counter, shoulders sagging. It was the first time I realized how scared he truly was. Eleanor, he murmured, you know I love you, right? The question pierced me. Of course, I whispered. He nodded slowly, as if trying to convince himself. I'm doing everything I can to keep us safe. Safe. A word that now felt impossibly far. He finished his water, returned to bed, and left me alone with the notebook hidden at my side. For the first time, I felt something stronger than fear rising inside me. Anger. Not because of the lies, but because he had been suffering alone, dragging all of us into a darkness he couldn't escape. And now that I was in it too, I wasn't going to let him stand there alone anymore. I pulled the notebook out again and looked at the words. Everything begins at the brickyard. Then I closed it firmly. I knew where I was going next. The next morning, I returned to the brickyard, alone, and discovered footprints, ashes, and a hidden clue that suggested someone had been waiting for me. The next morning rose cold and colorless, the kind of dawn that steals warmth from everything it touches. My hands trembled as I buttoned my coat, not from the cold, but from the certainty growing inside me. I had spent the entire night staring at the notebook, replaying Walter's trembling hands, Mrs. Langley's warning, and Garvey's uneasy eyes. The brickyard. Everything pointed back there. Walter had faced the tall man there. Garvey had seen him there before, and the notebook insisted. Everything begins at the brickyard. So I returned alone. The streets were quiet as I walked, my shoes crunching on gravel. I knew going alone was foolish. I knew danger waited there. But fear had changed inside me. It wasn't just terror anymore. It had become determination. A stubborn, unyielding need to understand what had consumed my husband for 13 years. When the brickyard's rusted gate came into view, my heartbeat grew uneven. The alley beyond it was the same narrow stretch of broken pavement, flanked by crumbled walls and overgrown weeds. But today, it felt different. It felt expectant. As I stepped inside, a faint smell reached me, burnt wood. Something had been burned here not long ago. My pulse quickened. I followed the smell to a small clearing behind a stack of old bricks. That's where I saw it. A pile of ashes, blackened, still warm. Someone had torched something there. I crouched down, gently lifting the edge of a charred fragment. It crumbled between my fingers, but I could still make out part of a paper corner, a trace of ink. Someone had burned documents. Letters, notes, evidence. My stomach tightened. Were they hiding their tracks, or trying to destroy something connected to Walter? I sifted through the ashes, fingers trembling. One small scrap hadn't burned fully. I pulled it out carefully. On it was a single word. Run! Not written hastily, not scribbled in panic. Written deliberately, not to Walter, no. This message was meant for me. My breath caught. Someone knew I was digging. Someone wanted to warn me. But who? Garvey, Langley, or someone else entirely? As I stood, brushing ash from my hands, something else caught my eye, a set of footprints in the soft dirt near the wall. 2 different sizes. One heavier, deeper. One lighter, smaller. Someone had met here, recently. I followed them carefully. The heavier prints led toward the fence and then vanished near the broken boards. Whoever it was had climbed over and left the brickyard quickly. The smaller prints stayed within the clearing, circling the ashes. They were precise, deliberate, like someone had been waiting, watching the fire burn. My throat tightened. Those prints looked like a woman's. I forced myself to continue, moving toward the far end where the alley narrowed. That's when I saw it, a faint mark on the wall, white chalk, a circle with a line through it. I froze. That same symbol was in the notebook, marked beside Garvey's name, beside 2 others I didn't recognize. And now here it was drawn on the wall like a sign or a signal. I reached out and touched it. The chalk smudged slightly. It was fresh. Someone had been here within the last hour. Suddenly, a sound echoed behind me, a soft scuff of a shoe. I spun around, heart racing. No one, not a single soul in sight. But the air, it shifted, like someone had just slipped away. I backed up slowly, eyes scanning every shadow. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. Every instinct screamed that I wasn't alone. Then I heard something faint, a whisper carried on the wind. Too late! I turned sharply, but the alley was empty. The whisper had no source, no face, no direction, only dread. My hands shook as I left the brickyard. I didn't stop walking until I reached the main road, where people moved about their morning routines, blissfully unaware of the darkness threading through our quiet neighborhood. As I approached home, I saw a figure standing near my front steps. Garvey, his posture stiff, his expression unreadable. He walked toward me with urgency, lowering his voice. "Eleanor, you need to come inside." "Now, why?" I whispered, breath still unsteady. He swallowed hard, glancing around us. "Because someone left something on your porch, and you're not going to like it." On my doorstep lay an envelope, and inside it was a photograph so terrifying, so personal, that it changed everything I thought I understood about who was behind all this. Garvey's urgency frightened me more than the cold morning wind whipping across our street. He wasn't a man who panicked easily, not after 30 years as a postman, not after witnessing more of life than most cared to. So when he looked at me with eyes tight and worried, I knew something waited on my porch that would hurt to see. "What is it?" I whispered. Garvey shook his head. "Better you look inside, but it's not good, Eleanor." My stomach tightened. We hurried toward my house together. As soon as I stepped onto the porch, I saw it, a small black envelope placed precisely in the middle of the welcome mat. Not tossed, not dropped, placed, like a gift wrapped with intention. Except this wasn't a gift. This was a message. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The paper felt cooler than the air, almost unnaturally so. Garvey hovered near the doorway, as if standing close could lessen the blow. "Should we call someone?" he asked quietly. "Let me see what it is first," I said. Perhaps I shouldn't have. But dread mixes with curiosity until they become the same thing, an unstoppable pull toward the truth, no matter how much it hurts. Inside was a single photograph. The moment I saw it, my knees buckled slightly. Garvey grabbed my arm to steady me. The photograph showed me, not from years ago, not from some public event. No, me, standing in the hallway last night, holding the stolen notebook from the shed. The lamp behind me, the fear in my eyes. The notebook pressed against my chest. Someone had taken the picture through my living room window. My breath hitched, a soft gasp escaping before I could swallow it. "Eleanor," Garvey whispered. This isn't normal." Normal. The word felt absurd. Someone had been inches from my home while I sat there, believing I was alone. Someone close enough to capture that moment without making a sound. I flipped the photo over. On the back, in sharp handwriting, were 4 words. "Put it back, tonight." A cold tremor rippled through me. "They know you took the notebook," Garvey murmured. "Whoever left this, they're watching everything." Watching, always watching. "Garvey," I whispered, this woman you mentioned, the one you saw with the tall man. "Do you think she took this?" Garvey hesitated, not in doubt, but in fear. "It could be her. It could be someone working with her. Eleanor, I've seen her talking to strangers near her gate these past weeks. And she's been carrying things, papers, boxes, late at night." The more he spoke, the clearer it became. Mrs. Langley wasn't just involved. She was deeply rooted in whatever this organization was, and she wasn't working alone. I stepped inside my house, Garvey following cautiously. I set the photograph on the kitchen table, unable to tear my eyes from it. The angle of the picture, the timing, the exact moment, it meant the watcher had been close. Close enough to see my hands shake, close enough to hear the creak of the floorboards, close enough to step through the door if they wanted. Garvey lowered his voice. "The message says, tonight. Whoever left this expects you to return something. That's dangerous." I nodded, my fingers brushing the edges of the photograph. "They want the notebook," I murmured. Garvey stiffened. "Notebook," I swallowed. "Yes, I found it in a place Walter was hiding. It has names, notes, marks, yours. Langley's, others, it explains everything." He went pale. "My name in that thing?" "Yes," I said softly, "next to a warning." Garvey rubbed his face with both hands, pacing the room. "Eleanor, listen to me. If your husband is tied up in something organized, something violent, you can't handle this alone." But I wasn't alone, not truly. Fear had turned into a different kind of resolve, one built on survival, one built on clarity. "I'm not giving them the notebook," I said firmly. Garvey stared at me, stunned. "If you don't, they may come inside." "Then let them," I replied quietly, "because I'm done being afraid of shadows." But even as I said it, the photograph on the table seemed to pulse with warning. Because if they could get that close without me noticing, they could get closer. Garvey exhaled shakily. "If you're not returning it, then we have to prepare. They won't wait long." I nodded slowly. Tonight they expected compliance. Tonight they expected fear. But tonight, I was done being hunted. Because if they wanted the notebook so desperately, then whatever was inside it was the key to unraveling everything. And I was ready to see what they had been hiding all these years. That night, someone tried to break into my house. And the moment I confronted them, I realized it wasn't the enemy I expected. Night fell with an unsettling heaviness, the kind that settles in your bones before you realize you're shivering. I checked every window twice, pulled the curtains tight, turned off the lamps, anything to make the house look ordinary, untouched, unworried. But inside, I was anything but steady. The photograph from earlier lay on the table like an accusation. Put it back. Tonight. A command, not a request. Whoever left it believed they had control over my fear. But fear sharpens you. Or breaks you. And I refused to break. Still, when the sun finally set, my hands trembled as I locked the front door. Garvey had insisted on staying nearby, watching from his own porch under the excuse of fresh air, though we both knew he was preparing to run over if anything went wrong. The house was silent except for the faint groan of wood cooling in the night air. I sat in the armchair with the notebook hidden under a blanket beside me, each tick of the clock louder than the last. 10 minutes. 20. An hour. Nothing. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe they wouldn't come. That maybe the warning was simply intimidation. That maybe the darkness would spare us. Then, sometime after midnight, I heard it. A soft, metallic click. Barely audible, but unmistakable. Someone was testing the back door. I held my breath, listening. Another click. A slow, careful turn of a lock. They were trying to get inside. My heart pounded against my ribs. I reached under the blanket and gripped the notebook tightly as if the thin pages could shield me. The doorknob turned again. Then a louder sound. A frustrated jolt. A muttered curse. Whoever it was wasn't skilled. Not smooth. Not silent. This wasn't the tall man from the alley. Not the woman from the shed. Someone else. I rose from the chair quietly and moved through the hallway, feet careful on the creaking floorboards. Each step felt heavier than the last. When I reached the back door, I stood still, tense, listening. A shadow shifted under the narrow strip of moonlight at the bottom of the door. Then a voice whispered, a voice I recognized. "Eleanor, open up, please." A chill rippled through me. Walter, my husband, he sounded desperate, tired, frantic. "Walter," I whispered back. "Yes," he said, voice trembling. "Please let me in, they're watching." My fingers hesitated on the lock. Something in his tone cracked the air, fear soaked in shame. I unlocked the door slowly and pulled it open. Walter stumbled inside, hair disheveled, coat wet with frost, eyes darting around wildly. He shut the door behind him and pressed his back to it, chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. "You shouldn't have opened it," he said in a hoarse whisper. "You shouldn't be out there," I replied. "What's going on?" He rubbed his hands together as if trying to warm them, though the shaking wasn't from the cold. "They know," he breathed. "They know you took the notebook." I swallowed hard. "Walter, who are they?" He closed his eyes, a pained expression pulling across his face. "People I should never have gotten involved with. People who don't forget. People who—" He stopped himself, gripping his temples. "Eleanor, you don't understand. I tried to keep you out of it." "You failed," I said quietly. The words pierced him like a blade. He looked away. "I know," he whispered. "And now everything is falling apart." I stepped closer, watching him closely. "Walter, who left that photograph?" I asked. He shook his head. "I don't know. It wasn't the men from the alley. They wouldn't warn you. If they wanted you hurt, they wouldn't take a picture first." "Then who?" I pressed. He hesitated. Then, with a defeated sigh, he said, "There's someone else involved, someone who used to help them. Someone who regrets it now." A sick feeling grew in my chest. "The woman?" I asked. "The one watching our house." Walter's shoulders tensed. "You saw her." "Yes," I said, "and she knows I went to that shed." Walter closed his eyes in agony. "Damn it, Eleanor, she was never supposed to meet you." She wasn't supposed to meet me, meaning Walter knew her, meaning this wasn't a stranger. With a trembling voice, I asked, "Walter, who is she?" Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Finally, he whispered her name. "Her name is Margaret, and she used to work with me." Work with him, not for him, not under him, with him. My pulse raced. "And she's the one watching us?" Yes, he said. She's trying to protect you. Protect me? Before I could question him further, someone knocked, 3 sharp raps on the front door. Walter's eyes widened in terror. They're here. But when I opened the door, it wasn't the men from the alley. It was someone even more shocking, holding information that shattered the last of my trust in Walter. Walter froze the moment the knock echoed through the house. 3 sharp raps, each one slicing through the silence like a warning bell. His eyes widened with a fear I had never seen in him before. Not even the man from the alley had terrified him this way. Don't open it, he whispered urgently. Please, Eleanor, don't. But fear doesn't work the same way once you've already stepped into the darkness. Fear changes. Fear becomes resolve. If someone had come to our door now, after everything, it meant they wanted something, and running wouldn't protect us anymore. I need to see who it is, I said, my voice steadier than my trembling hands. Walter reached for my wrist, but I pulled away gently. I have to. His shoulders sagged, and he slid down to the floor, burying his face in his hands. The sight of him like that, small, crumpled, broken, it hurt more than the lies. But I stepped toward the front door anyway. Another knock. This time only 2 raps, slower, more controlled. I looked through the peephole and nearly gasped. It wasn't the tall man, not Margaret, not a stranger. It was Mr. Garvey. But not the Garvey I knew. His expression wasn't soft or neighborly. It wasn't concerned, kind, or confused. No, his face was grave, heavy, determined. I opened the door halfway. Garvey, I whispered. He stepped inside without waiting for permission, closing the door behind him. The urgency radiated from him before he even spoke. Eleanor, he said under his breath, you need to listen to me carefully, and you need to do exactly what I say. Walter looked up from the floor, terror shifting into something else entirely. Shock. His lips parted. You, he breathed. Garvey didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge him at all. Instead, he locked eyes with me. They're moving tonight, he said. The men, the ones you saw at the brickyard. They're coming for the notebook and for Walter. My breath caught. How do you know that? Garvey's jaw tightened. Because they told me. The room tilted for a moment. My mind tried to reject the words, but they hung in the air with too much weight to ignore. You, my voice trembled. You're working with them? Garvey lowered his gaze, shame flickering across his features. I used to, he said. Not anymore, not after what they started doing, not after they brought her in. Her, I whispered. Margaret, he murmured. She wasn't supposed to get involved. She was only meant to help with deliveries, not this. Walter's body tensed. Garvey, please don't do this. Garvey finally looked at him, eyes filled with exhaustion. I warned you, Walter, years ago. I told you to get out while you could. But you didn't listen. You dragged it out. You paid, you delayed, and now they're done waiting. Walter crumpled again, head bowed between his knees. I stepped between them, my voice shaking. Garvey, why are you here? Why warn me? He exhaled deeply, rubbing his trembling hands together. Because Margaret came to me this afternoon, he said. She told me what she saw. Told me she left that photograph to scare you into giving up the notebook. She said the organization is losing patience, and if they don't get what they want tonight, his voice cracked. They'll come inside. My chest tightened. So Margaret wasn't trying to hurt me, she was trying to delay the others. Where is she now? I asked. Garvey hesitated. She's gone. She ran. She said she wouldn't be part of this anymore. A strange ache spread through me. Fear and relief mixed in unfamiliar ways. Garvey, Walter whispered hoarsely, please help us. Garvey closed his eyes for a moment before speaking. I'm not here to save you, Walter. That time passed long ago. I'm here for Eleanor. My breath caught. Me, he nodded. You're the only one who doesn't belong in this mess. The only one who shouldn't pay the price for their decisions. I blinked through the sting of tears. Tell me what I need to do. Garvey pointed at the hallway. You need to leave this house, tonight now, before they arrive. And Walter, I asked, my voice trembling. Garvey looked down. He's their debt. Not you. Walter squeezed his eyes shut, guilt twisting his features. No, I said quietly, shaking my head. I won't leave him. Garvey stared at me for a long moment. Then you don't understand the danger. I do, I said. But I'm not abandoning my husband, not now. He exhaled, shoulders slumping. Then you need to hide, both of you, somewhere they won't think to look. Where? I asked. Garvey hesitated before answering. "There's a place," he said. "A house no one's used in years, out by the edge of the woods." Walter looked up sharply. "The cabin," he whispered. Garvey nodded. "Yes, the one Margaret used when she first tried to leave the organization." A cold chill swept through me. Walter murmured, "It's not safe." Garvey stepped closer. "It's safer than being here when they arrive." I swallowed hard. "Then take us," I said. Garvey's eyes softened, maybe for the first time ever. "I will." But before any of us could move, a noise shattered the fragile calm. The sound of gravel crunching outside. Many footsteps, heavy, purposeful. Garvey stiffened. "They're here earlier than I thought." With danger closing in, Garvey grabbed my arm and whispered the one sentence that changed everything. "Don't look out the window, just run." Garvey's whisper sliced through the air like a blade. "Don't look out the window, just run." Before I could respond, he grabbed my arm, pulled Walter to his feet, and ushered us toward the back of the house. His movements were urgent but controlled, the movements of a man who knew exactly what danger looked like and how close it had come. Walter stumbled beside me, breath shallow, face pale. "They're early," he whispered. "They weren't supposed to come until—" Garvey cut him off. "They changed their plans, probably saw Margaret run." My chest tightened. If they were coming early, they weren't coming to negotiate. They were coming to take. Garvey guided us through the kitchen and toward the back door, but then paused, pressing his ear against the wood. Silence. Then two soft taps, not a knock, a signal. Garvey swore under his breath. They split up, some at the front, some around back. Fear wrapped cold fingers around my throat. "There's no time," Garvey said. "We go through the side window." He unlatched the small window above the counter and pushed it open. Cold air rushed in. He helped me climb through first, then Walter. Finally, he pulled himself out and landed softly on the grass. "Stay low," Garvey whispered. We crouched, keeping close to the fence as we moved. My heart thrashed in my ribs, each beat louder than the last. Behind us, the faint sound of footsteps approached our porch, slow, confident, unhurried. They knew we were inside. They thought they had time. But Garvey knew the shortcuts through our neighborhood better than any of them. We slipped between hedges, crossed into a neighbor's yard, and ducked behind an old tool shed. Walter clutched my arm. "I'm sorry," he whispered miserably. "I never wanted this. I thought I could keep it away from you." I didn't answer. Not because I wasn't hurt, God knows I was, but because survival demanded silence. Hurt would come later. Garvey peered around the shed, then signaled us forward. We moved house to house, yard to yard, until we reached the back road that led into the woods. The moon hung low, casting silver light across the narrow path. "Come on," Garvey said. "We're almost there." We followed the dirt trail, branches snapping under our feet. Every sound made me jump. The wind shivered through the trees like voices whispering warnings. Finally, the cabin came into view, a small, weather-worn structure half consumed by vines. No lights, no signs of life. Garvey hurried to the door and pushed it open. "Inside, quickly." Walter and I stepped in. The cabin smelled of dust and old wood, but at least it was shelter. Garvey closed the door and bolted it. "You'll be safe here for a little while," he said. "They don't know this place exists anymore." Walter collapsed onto the old sofa, burying his face in his hands. I turned to Garvey, voice trembling. "Tell me everything. Tell me why this happened. Tell me why my name was ever in that notebook." He exhaled slowly, the weight of years sinking into his shoulders. "Because Walter wasn't the only one they threatened," he said. "They used you to keep him obedient. They knew he'd do anything to protect you." I closed my eyes as the truth settled like a stone in my chest. Garvey continued quietly. "The organization started small, just smuggling and petty debts. Walter was young, desperate for money to pay off medical bills for his brother. They offered help and made sure he could never repay it." Walter's voice cracked. "I tried to leave. They said if I did, they'd come after Eleanor." "And Margaret?" I asked softly. Garvey's expression darkened. "She was forced into it. Did what she had to. When she realized they were watching you, she panicked. She wanted out. That's why she left the photo, her way of telling you to stop digging before they came." But I didn't stop, and they came. A sudden thump hit the outside wall of the cabin. We froze. Another thump. Closer, heavier. Garvey's eyes widened. No, they couldn't have followed us. Walter grabbed my hand, squeezing tightly. The cabin door rattled. Then a voice called softly through the wood. Eleanor, we know you're in there. My blood ran cold. Garvey motioned for us to stay silent. He slipped his hand into his coat pocket, revealing a small revolver. Stay behind me, he whispered. The door shook harder, but then footsteps, dozens of them. And suddenly voices outside shouted, Police, hands in the air. Police, real police. Garvey sagged with relief. Margaret, she must have gone to them. Officers swarmed the cabin, detaining the men who had followed us. When they opened the door, I felt my knees give way. We were safe. For the first time in months, we were safe. Walter leaned into me, exhausted, broken. Eleanor, he whispered, I'm so sorry. I held his trembling hand. Walter, we survived. That's what matters now. The officers led us outside, guiding us toward safety, toward a future without shadows lurking around every corner. For the first time in years, the night sky didn't feel threatening. It felt open, free, new. And as we walked away from the cabin, I realized something. Sometimes the darkest truths lead us into the light we never knew we needed. If you're still watching, thank you. Stories like this remind us how quickly life can change, and why we must protect the people we love, no matter the cost. If you want to hear more powerful real-life stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and come back tomorrow for a brand new story. Your support helps more than you know.